Commander Thelva stood on the bridge of his ship, watching the stars blur past. He had been a soldier for 17 years, and in all that time he had never felt afraid. It was impossible for him. His species, the Velthir, were born without the ability to feel fear. Their brains simply did not work that way. When danger came, they thought about it logically. They made plans. They acted with calm minds. This made them excellent soldiers. The Velthir were proud of this gift. They believed it made them better than other species in the galaxy. While others panicked and made mistakes, the Velthir stayed calm and won battles. Thelvas had commanded many missions for the Galactic Coalition, and he had never lost his composure. Not once today he received new orders. The Coalition wanted him to work with humans. Thelvas had heard of humans before. They were new to space travel, having only discovered faster-than-light technology 3 years ago. Their ships were old and patched together with stolen alien parts. Their weapons were basic. Their tactics seemed random and disorganized. Thelvas did not understand why the Coalition had accepted them as members. His orders said he would coordinate with Captain Jinho Park, who commanded a human ship called the Indomitable. The mission was simple enough. They needed to defend a mining colony called Dust Ridge 7. A group of raiders called the Krelith had been attacking colonies in the outer systems. The Coalition wanted to stop them. Thelvas studied the information about the humans he would work with. Captain Jinho Park had been in the Terran Defense Forces for 5 years. Lieutenant Yuna Choi ran the tactical systems on his ship. Sergeant Minho Kang led the ground troops. Their service records showed they had fought in several conflicts on their home planet before joining the Coalition. They had won some battles and lost others. Nothing impressive, Thelvas thought. When the human ship arrived, Thelvas prepared for the briefing. He watched the humans board his vessel through the airlock. They wore uniforms that looked worn and patched. Their equipment seemed old. Captain Jinho was a man of average height with dark hair and tired eyes. Lieutenant Yuna was younger, with sharp features and quick movements. Sergeant Minho was broad-shouldered and walked with a slight limp. The briefing room was standard Coalition design, with holographic displays and comfortable seating for multiple species. Thelvas activated the tactical display, showing the colony and the surrounding space. Red markers indicated where Krelith ships had been spotted. The Krelith typically attack with overwhelming numbers, Thelvas explained. His voice was calm and measured. They use speed and aggression. Our goal is to protect the colony until reinforcements arrive. I calculate we need to hold for approximately 8 hours. Captain Jinho studied the display. Thelvas noticed something strange. The captain's hands were shaking slightly. His breathing seemed faster than normal. The Velthir commander checked his scanner. The readings showed elevated heart rate, increased stress hormones, and dilated pupils. These were signs of physical distress. "Are you ill, Captain?" Thelvas asked. Jinho looked up, surprised. "No, Commander. I'm fine. Your biological readings suggest otherwise." Jinho smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "Just thinking about the battle ahead. We've studied the Krelith, but we've never fought them before." "Then you should be concerned," Thelvas said. "They are formidable opponents." "We're ready," Jinho replied. His voice was steady despite his physical state. "My crew knows what to do." Thelvas found this confusing. How could the captain claim readiness when his body showed clear signs of distress? It was illogical. Lieutenant Yuna also displayed similar readings, though she spoke confidently about defensive positions. Even Sergeant Minho, who seemed the most composed, showed elevated stress markers. The meeting continued. They discussed troop placements, firing solutions, and evacuation procedures. The humans contributed ideas, some of which made sense and others that seemed reckless. Throughout it all, their biological readings remained high. Whatever was affecting them continued without pause. After the briefing, Thelva spoke privately with his second-in-command, a Velthir named Kortal. "The humans display unusual physiological responses," Thelva said. "They show signs of extreme stress, yet they function normally." "Perhaps it is a species trait," Kortal suggested. "Humans are still mysterious to us." "It could affect their combat performance," Thelvas mused. "We should monitor them carefully." The next day, they began preparing the colony's defenses. Thelvas assigned positions based on optimal tactical advantage. His Velthir troops moved efficiently, setting up weapons and shields with practiced ease. The humans worked alongside them, but their approach was different. They checked and rechecked their equipment. They talked to each other constantly, sharing jokes and stories. They seemed distracted. Sergeant Minho noticed Thelvis watching. Is something wrong, Commander? Your troops lack focus, Thelvis observed. They should be concentrating on their tasks. Minho glanced at his soldiers. They're nervous. Talking helps them deal with it. Nervous? Thelvis repeated the unfamiliar term. Worried, anxious, afraid, Minho explained. Afraid. Thelvis had heard the word before but never truly understood it. Fear was an emotion his people did not possess. He tried to imagine what it meant. His best guess was that it caused the strange biological responses he had observed. But why would evolution create such a thing? What purpose did it serve? Does this fear make you weaker? Thelvis asked. Minho considered the question. Sometimes, but it also makes us careful, makes us think about what we're protecting. This answer did not satisfy Thelvis, but he said nothing more. He returned to his preparations, calculating firing angles and supply lines. The colonists had been moved to reinforced shelters. Medical stations were ready. Escape ships were fueled and waiting. Everything was logical and organized. That night, sensors detected incoming ships. The Kralith were coming, and they were coming in force. Thelvis counted the vessels on his display, more than expected, much more. He ran the calculations quickly. The enemy outnumbered them 4-1. The probability of successful defense dropped to 23%. Standard coalition protocol was clear. When success probability fell below 30%, forces should withdraw and regroup. It was the logical choice. Thelvis prepared to give the order. Commander, Captain Jinho's voice came through the communications system. We're detecting the Kralith force. They're bigger than intelligence suggested. Yes, Thelvis confirmed. I am issuing withdrawal orders now. We cannot hold against those numbers. There was a pause. Then Jinho spoke again and his voice was different, harder. We're not leaving those miners, Commander. We hold the line here. Thelvis looked at his display again, double-checking his numbers. Captain, the mathematics are clear. We cannot win. We don't have to win, Jinho replied. We just have to hold until reinforcements arrive. 8 hours, you said. The probability of surviving 8 hours against this force is extremely low. I understand the odds, Commander. Jinho's voice was firm. But those are people down there, families, children. We're not abandoning them. Thelvis checked Jinho's biological readings again. They were higher than ever. The stress hormones flooded the human system at dangerous levels. By all logic, the captain should be incapacitated. Yet his voice remained steady, his decisions clear. The Velthir commander made a choice. It went against his training, against probability, against logic itself, but something in the human's voice made him pause. Very well, Thelvis said slowly. We hold the line. All forces prepare for combat. As he gave orders to his troops, Thelvis wondered if he had just made a terrible mistake. The logical answer was yes, but the humans seemed certain despite their fear. He did not understand it, but he would see where it led. The Kralith ships entered weapons range. The battle was about to begin. The first wave of Kralith ships came fast and aggressive. Their weapons lit up the darkness of space with bright flashes. Thelvis watched from his command station as energy beams crossed the distance between the fleets. His own ships returned fire with calculated precision. Each shot was aimed to maximize damage while conserving ammunition. It was efficient. It was logical. The Kralith had different tactics. They swarmed like insects, overwhelming targets with sheer numbers. 3 of their ships would focus on one coalition vessel, hammering it with continuous fire until shields failed. It was brutal but effective. Eastern perimeter is taking heavy fire, Lieutenant Yuna reported from the Indomitable. Her voice was tense but controlled. We're holding, but barely. Thelvis checked the tactical display. The eastern position was weakest. The Kralith had identified it quickly. Standard doctrine suggested pulling back to strengthen the center. All eastern units withdraw to secondary positions, he ordered. Negative, Commander, Captain Jinho interrupted. If we give up the eastern bunker, they'll have a clear path to the colony's life support systems. We can't let that happen. The position is not defensible, Thelvis stated. We must consolidate our forces. Then we make it defensible, Jinho replied. Minho, send reinforcements to the eastern bunker. Already on it, Captain, Sergeant Minho's voice came through. Moving Squad 3 into position now. Thelvis did not argue further. He was curious to see if the human approach would work. His own Velthir troops maintained their positions with perfect discipline. They fired when optimal, conserved energy when needed. and rotated shifts to prevent fatigue. Everything by the book. The human troops operated differently. They moved in pairs, constantly talking to each other. They took unnecessary risks to recover wounded soldiers. They wasted ammunition on suppressing fire that had low probability of hitting targets, yet somehow they held their positions. Then Thelva saw something that made no sense at all. 3 human soldiers were pinned down in the eastern bunker. Kralith ground forces had breached the outer wall. The humans were trapped, taking cover behind damaged equipment. The logical solution was clear. Those 3 soldiers should surrender or retreat. Their position was lost. Sergeant Minho apparently did not understand logic. The human sergeant grabbed a plasma charge from his belt. It was a powerful explosive, meant for demolishing structures. He started running toward the breach, alone, without backup. Without cover. "What is that soldier doing?" Thelvis demanded. "Someone stop him." "That is suicide. That's Minho," Lieutenant Yuna said quietly. "He's buying them time." Thelvis watched in disbelief. Minho sprinted across open ground while Krelith weapons fired at him. Energy blasts scorched his armor. One hit his leg and he stumbled but kept running. Another hit his shoulder, spinning him around. He recovered and kept moving forward. The 3 trapped soldiers saw their chance. They ran from cover, heading back toward friendly lines. The Kralith turned their attention to these new targets, giving Minho a brief opening. He threw himself through the breach, landing among the enemy soldiers. For 3 seconds, Thelvis could see Minho fighting hand-to-hand through the tactical feed. The human moved with desperate violence, striking with his weapon and fists. Then he activated the plasma charge. The explosion collapsed the entire breach. Rock and metal sealed the gap. Smoke and dust clouded the area. For a moment, Thelvis thought the sergeant was dead. Then he saw movement. 2 human soldiers were dragging Minho away from the rubble. The sergeant was badly injured but alive. "Inefficient," Thelvis muttered to himself. He nearly died for 3 soldiers, but those 3 soldiers were already back in position, firing at the enemy. And the breach was sealed. The eastern bunker held. This pattern repeated throughout the battle. Humans making impossible choices, running into danger instead of away from it, sacrificing tactical advantage to save wounded comrades. It made no sense. It was wasteful. It was reckless. It was also working. The Kralith could not understand their enemy. They were used to fighting logical species that made predictable choices. The humans were unpredictable. They fought like cornered animals, desperate and fierce. When the Kralith expected retreat, the humans attacked. When they expected surrender, the humans fought harder. Thelvis observed all of this with growing fascination. He checked the biological readings of the human forces again. Their stress markers were off the charts. Heart rates were dangerously high. Some showed signs of exhaustion that should have made them unable to function. Yet they continued fighting. "Captain Jinho," Thelvis called. "Your troops are pushing beyond safe physical limits. They need rest." "We'll rest when the battle is over," Jinho replied. "How are your forces holding up, Commander?" "My troops are operating at 78% efficiency," Thelvis reported. "We can maintain this level for another 6 hours without difficulty." "Good. Because the Kralith are regrouping for another push." The enemy had pulled back slightly, gathering their remaining forces. Thelvis counted the ships. They had lost many vessels, but they still outnumbered the defenders. The next attack would be massive. "They will commit everything to the next assault," Thelvis predicted. "They know we are weakening. Are we?" Jinho asked. "Weakening, I mean." Thelvis checked his reports. Ammunition was down to 40%. Shield generators were failing on multiple ships. Ground forces had taken significant casualties. "Yes. We have lost 32% of our combat effectiveness. Then we'll have to make the other 68% count." The second wave hit harder than the first. The Kralith had learned from their mistakes. They focused fire on the strongest positions first, trying to break the defenders' will. But they did not understand that will worked differently for different species. The Velthir troops fought with the same calm efficiency they always had. When their position became untenable, they withdrew in perfect order. When ammunition ran low, they conserved shots. When shields failed, they adjusted tactics. Everything logical. Everything optimal. The humans fought like they were protecting their own families. Every meter of ground was defended with ferocity. Every fallen soldier was pulled to safety no matter the risk. Every Kralith advance was met with desperate counterattacks that defied probability. Lieutenant Yuna coordinated the orbital defense despite an injury to her shoulder. Thelvis could see blood on her uniform through the video feed, but she never left her station. Her fingers moved across the controls, directing fire support with remarkable precision for someone in her condition. "Lieutenant, you require medical attention," Thelvis observed. After the battle, "Commander," she replied without looking away from her display. "Right now I'm needed here." Sergeant Minho was back in action too, despite his injuries. He had refused to stay in the medical station, instead taking command of the reserve forces. He limped when he walked and his armor was scorched black, but his voice on the communications channel was strong. "All squads, the Krelith are pushing hard on the western approach," Minho called out. "We're shifting reserves to compensate. Stay tight, stay focused. We've made it this far. We're not giving up now." Thelvis noticed something in the sergeant's voice. It was the same thing he heard in Captain Jinho's voice, in Lieutenant Yuna's voice, in all the human voices. That strange quality that came through despite their obvious fear and pain. Determination. That was the word. The humans were afraid. Their bodies showed it clearly. They knew they might die. They understood the odds were against them. But they had decided that some things were worth fighting for even when afraid. Especially when afraid. Thelvis found himself watching the humans more than the tactical display. He was trying to understand something that his logical mind could not fully grasp. These creatures fought differently than any species he had encountered. Not better or worse, but different. More emotional. More desperate. More willing to sacrifice. The battle raged on for hours. Ships burned. Soldiers fell. Ammunition dwindled. But the line held. As the 6th hour approached, Thelvis realized something remarkable. Despite all probability, despite overwhelming odds, they were actually going to make it. The Krelith were breaking. Their attacks were becoming less coordinated. They had not expected such fierce resistance. 2 more hours. Just 2 more hours until reinforcements arrived. Then his sensors detected something new. More Krelith ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Not a small group, a fleet. Twice as many as before. Thelvis stared at the display. He ran the numbers. There was no chance now. None at all. They could not possibly hold against this many enemies. He looked at the human crew, still fighting despite their injuries and exhaustion. He thought about calling for retreat, but he remembered Captain Jinho's words. "We're not leaving those miners." For the first time in his life, Commander Thelvis had to make a decision that went completely against logic. And for the first time, he understood why that might be the right choice. Thelvis stared at the tactical display. The new Krelith fleet was massive. He counted the ships 3 times, hoping his sensors were wrong. They were not. The enemy now had enough forces to simply overwhelm the colony through sheer numbers. No amount of skill or bravery would matter. His processors ran the calculations automatically. Current defensive strength versus incoming enemy forces. Time until reinforcements versus time until complete defensive collapse. Probability of survival. Probability of successful evacuation. Every number told the same story: they were going to lose. "Commander," his second officer Cordal spoke quietly. "The logical action is clear. We must evacuate immediately." Thelvis agreed. He brought up evacuation protocols on his command console. If they started now, they could save approximately 60% of the colonists. The other 40% would not reach the ships in time. It was unfortunate, but it was the best possible outcome given the circumstances. "Captain Jinho," Thelvis activated the communication channel. "We must begin evacuation procedures. The new Krelith fleet makes defense impossible." There was a long pause. Thelvis could see Jinho on the video display looking at his own tactical screen. The captain's face was pale. His hands gripped the edge of his console. Those biological stress markers were higher than ever. "How many can we save?" Jinho asked quietly. "Approximately 3,000 colonists if we begin immediate evacuation. The others will not reach the transport ships in time. And if we stay and fight, the probability of success is less than 1%. We will likely lose everyone, including our own forces." Jinho closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them again, they had a strange look. Not defeat. Something else. Something Thelvis could not identify. "We hold," Jinho said. "All of us get out or none of us do." "That is not logical," Thelvis protested. "You are choosing to save no one instead of saving many." "I'm choosing to give everyone a chance instead of deciding who lives and who dies," Jinho replied. His voice was shaking now, but it was firm. "We hold the line." "That's final." Lieutenant Yuna spoke up from her station. The captain is right, Commander. We can't just abandon half the colony. We have to try. Try what? Thelvis demanded. The mathematics are absolute. We cannot win. Maybe not, Yuna admitted. But we can make them pay for every meter. We can buy time. We can hope that reinforcements arrive early. We can do something instead of nothing. Thelvis wanted to argue. He wanted to explain that hope was not a strategy. That emotion was clouding their judgment, that they were making a terrible mistake. But he looked at his display and saw the human forces preparing for the assault. Not one of them was falling back. Not one was running to the evacuation ships. They were all staying. All choosing to fight an impossible battle. Sergeant Minho's voice came through the communications channel. All squads, this is it. The big one. I won't lie to you. The odds are bad. Really bad. But we've got 5,000 people behind us who can't protect themselves. They're counting on us. So we're going to stand here. And we're going to make these Kralith wish they'd never heard of humans. You understand me? The responses came back immediately. Yes, sir. Multiple voices, strong despite the fear they must be feeling. They knew they were probably going to die. And they were going to fight anyway. Thelvis looked at his own Veltir troops. They waited calmly for orders, as they always did. They would fight because it was their duty. They would hold their positions because that was their training. But there was something different about the humans. Something in how they chose to fight. The Kralith fleet moved into attack formation, hundreds of ships all bearing down on the small colony. It was like watching a wave approach the shore, knowing it would sweep everything away. Thelvis prepared to give orders. His mind worked through defensive positions, firing solutions, tactical retreats, all the calculations he had done thousands of times before. But then something strange happened. His mind suddenly showed him images he had not requested. He saw his own ship exploding. He saw his troops dying. He saw the colony burning. He saw the faces of the human crew frozen in death. These were not logical projections. They were vivid, terrible, overwhelming. His breathing quickened. His dorsal ridge contracted. A physical response he had never experienced before. His heart beat faster. Something cold spread through his body, making his limbs feel heavy. Commander? Cortal looked at him with concern. Your readings are unusual. Are you malfunctioning? Malfunctioning. That was the only word his second officer had for what was happening, because Veltir did not experience this. They could not. Their species had evolved past it, but Thelvis was experiencing it now. The images kept coming. Death, failure, loss. Every terrible outcome his mind could imagine, playing out in crystal clear detail. He saw Captain Jinho's ship torn apart. He saw Lieutenant Yuna crushed under falling debris. He saw Sergeant Minho overwhelmed by Kralith soldiers. He saw the colonists screaming as the life support failed. His perfectly rational mind was fragmenting. Logic was being replaced by something else, something primal and terrible. Commander Thelvis. Lieutenant Yuna's voice cut through his paralysis. Are you all right? Your readings are... We've never seen a Veltir display these patterns before. Thelvis tried to speak. His voice came out rough. I am experiencing something. I do not know what it is. Captain Jinho looked at him through the video display. Something changed in the captain's expression, recognition, understanding. Commander, what are you feeling right now? Describe it. I see. Terrible things. Outcomes, deaths, failure. My mind shows me scenarios that are probable but not certain. I cannot stop it. Are you shaking? Thelvis looked at his hands. They were trembling. Yes. Is your breathing fast? Heart rate elevated? Yes. Jinho leaned forward, his eyes meeting Thelvis through the screen. Commander, you're experiencing fear. You're afraid. The word that Thelvis had never understood. The emotion his species had evolved beyond. Except he was feeling it now. After 17 years of service, after countless battles, after a lifetime of calm logic, he finally understood what fear meant. It was horrible, overwhelming. It made him want to run. It made him want to hide. It crushed rational thought under the weight of terrible possibilities. How did humans function with this inside them? How did they make any decisions at all? And now you know why we fight the way we do, Jinho said softly. We're not fearless, Commander. We're full of fear. We're terrified most of the time. But we decided a long time ago that some things are worth being afraid for. Thelvis looked at the human captain. Really looked at him. Jinho was afraid too. had been afraid this entire time. All the biological markers Thelvas had observed, all the stress readings, they were all signs of fear. The humans had been fighting with this terrible emotion weighing on them from the very beginning. How? Thelvas managed to ask. How do you function like this? You learn to work with it instead of against it, Yuna explained. She was still at her station, blood still staining her uniform, still doing her duty. Fear shows you what matters, what you're willing to protect. It makes you understand the stakes, but it is so overwhelming. Yes, Minho agreed. His voice was steady despite everything. It is, but you know what's more overwhelming? Living with the knowledge that you ran when people needed you. That's worse than any fear. The Kralith fleet was almost in position. The final assault would begin in minutes. Thelvas felt the fear pulsing through him, trying to make him flee. Every instinct he did not know he had was screaming at him to evacuate, to save himself, to choose logic over emotion. But he looked at the humans. They were all afraid. Every single one of them. He could see it in their faces, in their movements, in their biological readings. They knew they were probably going to die. The fear was crushing them just as it was crushing him, and they were preparing to fight anyway. Thelvas made a decision. Not a logical one, not one based on probability or calculation, a decision based on something else, something he was just beginning to understand. All Velthir units, he spoke into his command channel. His voice was shaking, but he continued. We hold this line. Whatever it costs. We protect the colony. We protect these people. We do not retreat. His troops responded with acknowledgement. They trusted his orders, even when those orders went against everything they had been taught. Cordal looked at him with confusion. Commander, this is not logical. No, Thelvas agreed. It is not. But it is right, the Kralith fleet opened fire. The final battle had begun. And for the first time in his life, Commander Thelvas fought not with cold logic but with the fierce desperation of someone who knew what he might lose. The Kralith fleet came like a storm. Hundreds of ships firing together created a wall of energy that lit up space. Thelvas watched the first impacts hit their defensive shields. The numbers on his display dropped rapidly. Shield strength at 70%, 60%, 50%. They were losing protection faster than the generators could recharge. The fear inside him grew stronger. Every explosion, every casualty report, every system failure fed it. His mind kept showing him death, his own, his crew's, everyone's. The rational part of his brain tried to assert control, tried to make calm decisions. But the fear would not let go. Northern defense grid is failing, Cortal reported. We are losing ships, Thelvas saw it on his display. 3 Velthir vessels destroyed in seconds. Good soldiers. Efficient officers gone. The fear twisted in his chest like a physical thing. He had never felt loss like this before. When Velthir died in battle, he had always processed it as acceptable casualties. Numbers in a report. Now each death felt personal, terrible. Reinforce the northern grid, he ordered. Pull ships from the southern approach. That will leave the south vulnerable, Cordal warned. I know. Do it anyway. This was not how Thelvas normally gave orders. Usually he would calculate all options, choose the optimal path, explain his reasoning. Now he was making decisions based on instinct, on feeling, on the desperate need to protect as many as possible. The Kralith adapted quickly. When the northern defense strengthened, they shifted focus to the south, always finding the weakest point. Always pressing the advantage. They were logical in their attack, efficient. Everything Thelvas had been trained to be. But the defenders were fighting with something beyond logic now. Captain Jinho, Thelvas called. The southern approach needs support. Already moving, Jinho replied. The Indomitable turned, its engines burning hot as it raced to fill the gap. The ship was damaged, trailing atmosphere from a hull breach, but it kept fighting. Lieutenant Yuna coordinated the defensive fire with remarkable skill. Despite her injury, despite the fear that must be tearing at her, she directed the weapons with precision. Every shot counted. Every target was chosen carefully. She made the limited ammunition stretch further than probability suggested it could. Kralith landing craft approaching the surface, she reported. They're going to hit the western bunker. Minho, you've got incoming, Jinho warned. I see them, the sergeant replied. We're ready. Thelvas switched his view to the ground forces. He watched as Kralith dropships descended toward the colony. They came in fast, dodging defensive fire, Some were hit and spiraled away in flames. Others made it through, landing near the defensive positions. The Kralith ground forces poured out of their ships. They were large creatures, heavily armored, carrying powerful weapons. They outnumbered the defenders 3-1. The logical outcome was clear, but Sergeant Minho had never cared much for logic. "All squads, weapons free," he shouted. "Make them earn every step." The human soldiers opened fire. Their weapons were older and less powerful than Kralith guns, but they used them well. They fought from cover, supporting each other, creating crossfires that cut down the advancing enemies. When the Kralith got too close, the humans fought hand-to-hand with desperate ferocity. Thelva saw Minho in the thick of it. The sergeant moved despite his injuries, directing his troops, filling gaps in the line, pulling wounded soldiers to safety. The man should have been in a medical bay. Instead, he was fighting harder than anyone. The Velthir ground forces fought alongside the humans. Thelvis noticed something changing in his troops. They had always been efficient soldiers, following orders, executing tactics. But now they fought with something extra, something they had learned from the humans. They fought with purpose. A Velthir soldier named Talrek was pinned down by enemy fire. The logical choice was to wait for support. Instead, a human soldier named Hyun ran to his position, providing covering fire. Together, they pushed back the Kralith advance. When Hyun was wounded, Talrek dragged him to safety, just as he had seen humans do for their own. The fear in Thelvas's chest burned. But it was changing. It was not just terror anymore. It was something else. A fierce protectiveness, a determination to make sure his troops, the humans, the colonists, all survived. The fear showed him what he might lose, and that made him fight harder to keep it. "Commander," Kortal spoke urgently, "our ammunition reserves are critical. We have perhaps 30 minutes of sustained fire remaining." 30 minutes. The reinforcements were still an hour away. The mathematics were still impossible. They could not win. But Thelvis did not care about mathematics anymore. "Then we make 30 minutes count," he said. He looked at his tactical display with new eyes, not calculating probability but looking for opportunities. The Kralith were attacking in waves, throwing forces at the defenders. It was working. The defensive line was crumbling. But it also meant the Kralith were spread out, committed to multiple attack vectors. An idea formed, not a logical plan, a desperate gamble. "Captain Jinho, I need your ship to do something dangerous." "What else is new?" Jinho replied. There was grim humor in his voice. "What do you need?" "The Kralith command ship is hanging back, directing the fleet. If we can take it out, their coordination will fail." "Agreed, but it's deep in their formation. We'd have to punch through dozens of ships to reach it." "Yes." There was a pause. "You're asking me to make a suicide run." "I'm asking you to be human," Thelvis said. "To do something illogical and desperate because it is the only chance we have." He heard Jinho laugh. It was a tired sound, but real. Never thought I'd hear a Velthir ask for that. "All right, Commander. Let's be crazy together." Yuna, plot a course straight through their fleet. "Fastest route to that command ship." "Captain, there's no way we survive that approach," Yuna warned. "I know. Plot it anyway." Thelvis watched as the Indomitable turned toward the heart of the Kralith fleet. The human ship accelerated, pushing its damaged engines to maximum. It was one small vessel against dozens of enemy ships. The probability of success was less than 1%. But Thelvis had learned something about humans. They did not fight because of probability. They fought because of possibility. "All Velthir ships provide covering fire for the Indomitable," Thelvis ordered. "Give them a path through." His fleet moved to support the human ship. They concentrated their fire on the Kralith vessels blocking the approach. It meant exposing themselves, weakening their own defenses. Every tactical manual said it was wrong. Thelvis did it anyway. The Indomitable plunged into the enemy formation. Kralith ships fired from all sides. The human ship's shields flared and died. Hull breaches opened. Systems failed. But it kept going, weaving through the enemy fleet with wild maneuvers that made no sense but somehow worked. "They're almost there," Kortal said. He sounded amazed. Thelvis held his breath. He watched the human ship close the distance to the Kralith command vessel. So close, just a bit further. Then a Kralith cruiser moved to block the path. It was larger than the Indomitable, more heavily armed. One direct hit would destroy the human ship. "We're not going to make it," Yuna reported. Her voice was steady despite the situation. "That cruiser is in the way." "Ram it," Jinho ordered. "Captain?" "You heard me. Full speed. Ram that ship." Thelvas watched in disbelief as the Indomitable aimed directly at the Krelith cruiser and accelerated. The human ship was smaller, lighter, already damaged. Ramming an enemy vessel was not a tactic. It was suicide. The ships collided. The impact was massive. Both vessels shuddered, locked together. The Krelith cruiser was crippled but still functional. The Indomitable was dying. Launching all missiles, Yuna said. Firing at the command ship. The Indomitable released every weapon it had left. Missiles streaked across the short distance to the Krelith command vessel. The enemy ship tried to evade, but it was too late. The missiles hit one after another, tearing through shields and armor. The Krelith command ship exploded in a brilliant flash. Target destroyed, Yuna reported. Then the transmission cut off. Thelvas stared at his display. The Indomitable was still locked with the Krelith cruiser, both ships drifting, both heavily damaged. He could not detect life signs. The transmission was dead. The fear in his chest became a sharp, stabbing pain. He had sent them to their deaths. Captain Jinho, Lieutenant Yuna, the entire crew. They had succeeded, but the cost was everything. Then something happened that Thelvas had not predicted. Without their command ship, the Krelith fleet faltered. Their coordinated attacks became confused. Ships fired on each other by accident. Formation broke apart. The logical, efficient assault turned into chaos. All forces press the attack, Thelvas ordered. His voice was rough with emotion he could not name. Make their sacrifice count. The Velthir and remaining human forces struck hard. They exploited the confusion, hitting the disorganized Krelith ships. What had been an impossible defense became a real fight, and in the distance Thelvas's sensors detected new ships arriving. Coalition reinforcements early by 30 minutes. They had heard the distress signals and pushed their engines to the limit. The Krelith saw them too. Their fleet was broken, their command gone, fresh enemies arriving. They made the logical choice. They retreated. The battle was over. The Krelith fleet had retreated into faster-than-light travel, leaving behind their dead and damaged ships. Coalition reinforcements secured the area, their fresh vessels moving through the debris field. The colony was safe. The mission was successful, but Thelvas felt no satisfaction. He stood on the bridge of his ship, staring at the section of space where the Indomitable had made its final attack. The human ship was still there, locked with the Krelith cruiser, both vessels dark and silent. Rescue teams were moving toward them, but Thelvas did not hope. He had seen the damage. No one could have survived that. Commander, Kortal approached carefully. The casualty reports are complete. We lost 42% of our forces. It is the highest loss rate in Velthir military history, 42%. By any logical measure, the battle had been a disaster. They should have evacuated. They should have saved who they could and retreated. Following standard doctrine would have resulted in far fewer casualties. But every colonist was alive. Every single one. 5,000 people who would have died were now safe. The mathematics said one thing, but the outcome said another. The humans, Thelvas asked quietly. The Indomitable crew. Any survivors? Rescue teams are cutting through the hull now. The ship took catastrophic damage. Life support failed. We do not expect to find anyone alive. Thelvas felt the fear again. Not the overwhelming terror of battle, but a deep, aching dread. Captain Jinho, who had taught him what courage meant. Lieutenant Yuna, who had fought through injury without complaint. The entire crew who had sacrificed themselves. Gone. I sent them to their deaths, Thelvas said. His voice was hollow. You gave them a mission. They chose to accept it. They trusted me. They followed my orders. Kortal was quiet for a moment. Is this what fear feels like all the time for humans? This pain? I think so, or part of it. How do they function? How do they make any decisions when every choice might result in this feeling? Thelvas did not have an answer. He was still learning what it meant to feel, still trying to understand how the humans had lived with this their entire lives. His communicator beeped. Commander, this is Rescue Team 7. We have reached the Indomitable's bridge. There are survivors. Thelvas's heart lurched. How many? Still counting, sir. But we have found Captain Jinho Park. He is alive, injured, but stable. Lieutenant Yuna Choi as well. They sealed themselves in an emergency shelter when life support failed. The relief that flooded through Thelvas was as powerful as the fear had been. They lived. Not everyone, the casualty count from the Indomitable would still be high, but the captain and lieutenant had survived their impossible mission. Get them to medical immediately, Thelvas ordered. Best care available. Already on it, Commander. Thelvas allowed himself a moment of something he did not quite recognize. Later, he would understand it was hope. The painful, beautiful feeling that came after fear, when the worst did not happen. 2 hours later, Thelvas stood in the medical bay. The room was full of wounded soldiers from multiple species. Veltir troops receiving treatment in their specialized sections. Humans being attended by their own medics and coalition doctors learning human physiology. The smell of antiseptic and the sound of medical equipment filled the air. He found Captain Jinho in a bed near the back. The human was wrapped in bandages connected to various medical devices. His face was pale, showing bruises and burns, but his eyes were open and aware. "Commander," Jinho said when he saw Thelvas. His voice was weak but steady. "Did we win?" "You destroyed the command ship." The Kralith fleet retreated. Every colonist survived. Jinho closed his eyes briefly. "Good. That's good. You nearly died. Your entire ship nearly died." "But we didn't." Jinho opened his eyes again, looking directly at Thelvas. "And 5,000 people get to live because of it. That's the trade we made. I'd make it again." Thelvas did not understand. Could not understand how someone could accept such a terrible risk so calmly. "You were afraid. I saw your readings. You knew you might not survive." "Of course I was afraid. Terrified, actually. When we made that final run, when I gave the order to ram that ship, I thought that was it. The fear was overwhelming. Then, why did you do it?" Jinho smiled slightly despite his pain. "Because being afraid doesn't mean you can't act. It means you understand what you're risking. What matters enough to risk it for. Those colonists mattered. My crew understood that. We were all afraid, but we did it anyway." Lieutenant Yuna was in the next bed. Her shoulder was heavily bandaged, and she had other injuries Thelvas could see. She had been listening to the conversation. "The commander experienced fear during the battle," she said to Jinho. "First time for his species, apparently." Jinho looked at Thelvas with surprise. "Really? What was it like?" "Terrible," Thelvas admitted. "Overwhelming. I saw death everywhere. I felt certain we would fail. My logical mind could not overcome it. But you stayed. You fought. Yes. Because you stayed. Because you showed me that fear is not the end of action. It is the beginning of choice." Sergeant Minho entered the medical bay then, limping badly but refusing assistance. His armor was gone, replaced with bandages and medical wraps. He should have been in bed, but Thelvas was beginning to understand that humans did not always do what they should. "Captain, Lieutenant," Minho nodded to them. "Good to see you alive. Heard it was close." "Too close," Yuna agreed. "How are the ground forces?" "Tired, hurt, but alive." "We held the line." Minho turned to Thelvas. "Your troops fought well, Commander. I saw them out there. By the end they were fighting like humans. All heart, no quit." "They learned from your example," Thelvas said. "As did I." The four of them were quiet for a moment. Around them, the medical bay continued its work. Doctors moved between patients. Wounded soldiers rested. The aftermath of battle played out in 1,000 small scenes of pain and recovery. "The Coalition Command wants a full report," Thelvas said eventually. "They are calling the battle a miracle. They do not understand how we held against such numbers." "What will you tell them?" Jinho asked. "The truth. That we held because the humans taught us something the Veltir had never known. That fear, when properly understood, is not weakness. It is the foundation of courage." "That's going to confuse a lot of people," Yuna said with a tired smile. "Good. They should be confused. I have also recommended that human tactical doctrine be studied and integrated into coalition strategy, and that human forces be assigned to high-risk operations where their particular skills are most valuable. Minho raised an eyebrow. You're recommending they send us into the worst fights? I am recommending they send you where courage matters most. Where someone needs to stand despite impossible odds. Where logic says retreat, but the mission requires victory. Because we're crazy? Minho asked. No, because you understand that some things are worth being afraid for, worth dying for. The Velthir fight efficiently, you fight desperately, and sometimes desperation is the only appropriate response. Thelvas looked at each of them. These humans who had changed everything he understood about combat, about emotion, about himself. He had started this mission believing his species was superior because they felt no fear. Now he understood that was not superiority. It was limitation. I did not know fear until the day I fought beside humans, Thelvas said quietly. And I am grateful. You taught me something my species had lost, or perhaps never had. You taught me what it means to choose to stand when standing is hard, to fight when fighting is terrifying, to protect others even when logic says the cost is too high. Welcome to being human, Jinho said with a weak smile. It's not easy, but it's real. Yes, real. Thelvas tested the word. It felt appropriate. The Velthir way was efficient, logical, optimal, but the human way was real, messy and emotional and often illogical, but real in a way that mattered. The Coalition would study what happened at Dust Ridge 7. They would write reports and develop new tactics. But Thelvas knew the real lesson could not be taught through reports. It had to be experienced, felt, lived through. Fear was not the enemy. Fear was the teacher. It showed you what mattered, what you cared about enough to fight for, to risk for, to die for. The Velthir had evolved past fear and thought themselves better for it. But they had also lost something important in the process. The humans had kept it. And now, through their example, the Velthir could learn it again. As Thelvas left the medical bay, he felt the fear still present in his chest. Not the overwhelming terror of battle, but a quieter concern, worry for his troops, awareness of dangers yet to come, understanding that he could lose people he cared about. It was uncomfortable. It made everything more complicated. Logic was simpler, easier, cleaner. But as Captain Jinho had said, it was real, and real, Thelvas was learning, was better than easy. The galaxy was a dangerous place. The Coalition faced many threats. There would be more battles, more impossible odds, more moments when logic said to retreat, but duty demanded a stand. But now the Coalition had something new. They had humans, and they had Velthir who understood what humans had always known. Sometimes you had to be afraid, sometimes you had to stand anyway, and sometimes that was enough. Commander Thelvas looked out at the stars. Out there somewhere the Krellith were regrouping. Other threats waited, more battles would come.